Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to the Heartbeat. Today we're going to be talking about episode 2 of season 1 of HBO's The Night Of. Join me, won't you? So, I've got to say, I was very excited to watch this second episode of HBO's The Night Of, if only because, as intriguing as that first premiere episode was, I still wasn't fully convinced that this show's primary objective was to be a murder mystery. Now, I still had this sneaking suspicion that, similar to other brilliant shows like Lost, The Leftovers, or Twin Peaks, it intended to draw me in with the MacGuffin of the why, how, and who done it, yes, but then hold me there by not so much every single episode peeling back some insane mystery pertaining to its crime, but peeling back some subtler mysteries pertaining to each of its characters. So Detective Box is indeed a subtle beast, but as is every other character on this show. And really seeing that this week was extremely exciting for me, knowing that this show will be a fiercely nuanced exploration of the people within the judicial system on both sides of the bench and on both sides of the law, and how each of them have their strengths and weaknesses, strong points and blind spots, morals and brokenness. And the two individuals that this episode seemed very intent on exploring quite deeply were Detective Box and attorney Jack Stone, and just how each of them were really anything but black or white, which in a way would have been so helpful. It would have been just so much neater and cleaner were one the angel and one the demon on Naz's shoulders. Because in the stories that we tell and in the lives that we live, we just long for those clear, distinct lines. And in this case, it wouldn't even have mattered all that much were Stone Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird, or Paul Beigler from Anatomy of a Murder, or if Box were Margie Gunderson from Fargo, or the Lieutenant from Bad Lieutenant. A simple, clear motivation from one or a simple, clear motivation from another would have alleviated so much struggle in our hero's life. But that's not real life, and what Naz learned so quickly this week was the real-life judicial system is so different as to what he might have wanted it to be. It was not Law and Order, fast, slick, and wrapped up in under 45 minutes. And that really was what I loved about everything that Mr. and Mrs. Khan endured this week. We saw straight away, for example, that their ride to prison took a lot longer to arrive than they expected, long enough anyways for Safar to make a meal for her son, which most certainly got cold as they initially went to the wrong precinct and then were forced to wait around until Detective Box showed up just so that he could be the good cop and be the one to allow them to speak to their son. And even after that, we just got these brutally realistic touches that illustrated how out of their depth this family was, just being forced to sit around and try and fight for their son by visiting nycourts.gov, and even that was all too soon stripped away from them as their computer was confiscated by the police. And really with everything that the parents endured in this episode, we saw such patient plotting happening, really which was kind of designed to stand in contrast to what we might expect. Though in this episode, it was Naz that felt this feeling most acutely. For him, more than wanting to believe that he could be back home in the next 48 hours, he wanted to believe that it would be truth that would set him free. He wanted to believe in good intentions and honest questioning, and that those things would rule the day. Like he himself said, "I don't understand how truth could hurt me." And I really couldn't fault him for saying that, because even as Detective Box was clearly trying to use the sentiment to his own advantage, he did have a point when he said, there's an immense sense of relief when they finally let go and just tell someone the truth. And obviously at that point, Naz wouldn't have been confessing to a murder, but there was still so much bouncing around in the isolation of his own brain with all that had occurred the night before. And we just saw that so perfectly captured in the opening moments of this episode as the camera pushed back through Andrea's apartment, the echoes of the previous night's happenings still reverberating off the floors and walls. And I think so many of us can unfortunately identify with that feeling, holding something inside of us, especially something that's extremely painful or inherently confusing, to the point where it becomes so muddied and hazy that we can't remember what's true and what's false. And that's part of the beauty of confession, being able to lay something out in front of ourselves so that even we can see it more clearly. And you could feel that from Naz this entire episode, just that longing to candidly express all that had occurred. But he was never given that, and I thought the visuals on this episode specifically really did a phenomenal job of capturing the isolation that brought, boxing him in even tighter frames in his already shoebox-sized cell, or obscuring from view the guards that walked next to him, as well as illustrating the confusion that isolation brought, quite literally turning his world upside down by panning to his reflection in a puddle. And not even in his parents' visit was Naz able to find that release, a scene that we entered having been so painfully shown the kind of guilt and embarrassment that Naz was enduring as the camera lingered on the grossness of that room, reminding him that the other individuals who had sat at that table were foul and broken, yes, but had clawed for their innocence just like he was now. And he may not be guilty of murder, but he certainly had made choices that he knew his parents would most surely be ashamed of. As that scene continued, though, he quite quickly and quite unfortunately, but quite necessarily, shed that embarrassment, replacing it with the intelligence and deception that many people were complaining he lacked on last week's episode. And though some of that came through the coaching that he'd received from Stone, I would argue that much of it simply came from the fact that he was out of the fight or flight mode, completely sober, and provided with the space to actually consider his actions and his words, things that last week's predicament never really afforded him. With that said, even as Nas had more time and space to process things this week, that didn't stop this entire situation from still feeling like this unending nightmare from which he could never escape. And I thought especially this episode's usage of slow motion lent a number of sequences just that dreamlike quality, and also the way that the episode ended just continued to reinforce that as Nas passed from the metaphorical light of day into the darkness of night. And connected to things kind of possessing that dreamlike, out-of-focus quality, I thought it was very effective the way that Zaillian chose to shoot the brief moment after Mr. Taylor learned of his stepdaughter's death. As seen through what the camera focused on, the moment was so clearly not about the person speaking, or even the words that they were speaking, as they themselves ran together into nothingness. But what was really great about that moment, and so many moments in this episode, was it communicated, yes, we should consider this man's behavior and what it might indicate about his connection, or lack thereof, to the murder, but more dynamic and interesting still, it got me to think, what does this man's behavior say about him as a human? Who was he? Where had he been? And why was he acting this way? And with that, let's go ahead and talk about Mr. Jack Stone and what his behavior said about him as an individual, because kind of in a really odd sort of way, who Jack Stone is and how he's conducted himself for so long can really kind of be summed up quite well in his rather unfortunate eczema, which, yes, is a very weird comparison, but go with me for just a second. On a daily basis, Stone is forced to take on and shed clients like they're nothing more than dead skin. He's just never been given the chance to care because he's seen time and again crimes, and those that commit them are in so many ways just itches that will always need scratching. And so to invest on a personal level has just never been worth it. It's too costly. And even as Detective Box was really speaking the words to smear the lawyer and to earn Nas's trust, he still absolutely was making an accurate assessment of the man as he talked about why he was downstairs drinking coffee with the detectives and breaking their balls. As it was, Jack Stone had no personal investment in this case because whether Nas was found guilty or not guilty, he had already won. He had scored the high-profile murder case, and that was the important thing to him about this job. And that was really highlighted all the more as people time and again throughout this episode congratulated him for being in the right place at the right time, which definitely pointed out that divide between he and Nas, because the latter was very much in the wrong place at the wrong time. I thought the most interesting illustration of Stone's lack of personal investment, though, came when the judge used the phrase, and you both know how I usually like to split the baby in terms of bail, as it was a reference to King Solomon of Israel, who, when two women came to him, both claiming to be the mother of a young child, said, "Divide the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other." And when one mother responded by saying, "He shall be neither mine nor yours, divide him," and the other cried, "Oh my lord, give her the living child, by no means put him to death," Solomon instantly knew who the child's mother was. So in the same way as Jack Stone put up that very small fight to get Nas bail, we got a pretty good indication of how much investment he had in the individual. All he could really muster was a parting, "Don't talk to anyone." Even so, I thought the episode did a great job of proving that he wasn't just some conscienceless scumball. This was just a man with eczema, physical and emotional, and had it for quite some time. It will be interesting to see if this season really will be about the healing of that, and if Jack Stone can eventually refuse to shed someone like Nas so easily. It will also be very interesting to see what this case takes Detective Box, because his very concerned and considered deliberation in this episode definitely communicated to me his desire to feel right about charging Nas with murder. Even as the pieces pointed to that being true, he himself, in a very personal way, still didn't feel right about it. And because that was his initial feeling, and he held onto it for so long, we knew that it meant a great deal when he finally went to the lawyer and expressed to her his certainty over Nas's guilt. Going forwards, though, you've got to wonder what will happen if/when he discovers that Nas isn't guilty. And even more interesting and painful to speculate, what will happen if he discovers that and isn't able to prove it? Food for thought. Anyways, but my favorite moment of this entire episode, though, probably happened at the end of that first day when we see Detective Box, Jack Stone, Nazir Khan, and his family, all of them in their own physical space, all of them enduring and processing something slightly different, but so brilliantly and cinematically shown to be unified. Because if you turn up the bass loud enough on your TV or watch the episode with a nice pair of headphones, you'll hear that director Steven Zaillian placed underneath each of those vignettes the same thumping beat. A pulse that declared that despite their numerous differences, they were all still connected. And it's really fantastic character moments like that keep me engaged on such a slowly paced show like The Night Of. Those are my thoughts anyways on this week's episode. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the episode, so definitely comment below and let me know. Also, I would love to answer more of your guys' Twitter questions, so hop on over to Twitter, hashtag your questions the Heartbeat, and I will answer as many of them as I can right here on the show each week. Finally, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.